Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. In this video we will discuss about poetry and drama. Types of poetry and types of drama. These are the two sorry for the disturbance. So we have these are two genres of literature, poetry and drama. We will define poetry and drama and its types. First of all, poetry is an overflow of spontaneous overflow of ideas. It is described as, again, it is form of patterns, sound, symbols, because in literature, when we read about some prose, it is written in the form of paragraphs. So the focus is on the words and sentences. In poetry, words are important, but in apart from words, images are used, sound patterns are used, and figurative language is also used to convey the message. So poetry involves figurative language, imagery or images, sounds, words. They are obviously always there, but apart from words, these are three four things they are used to convey the message to the reader, whatever the poet or the writer he wants to convey the message. In poetry, the famous poem that we have in our syllabus of if I if I'm not wrong, it is somewhere in class 8 or class 10 in school level, that is Daffodils, written by Shakespeare. A short and very beautiful poem, very easy poem. So this is the definition of poetry. We have the first in English literature, we come across the first ever written poem was Beowulf. Then we have the prologue to the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, father of English poetry. Then we have Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser, sonnets written by Shakespeare, and odes written by many other poets, but specifically by Keats, John Keats. So these are the different types, the different poems that, as example, I have given here. But poetry, again, I repeat, it is not only poetry is not only. What the difference between poetry and prose is that the writer and the poet, they focus on the use of images and sounds and figurative language to convey their message, instead of using only words. So including words, they use these three four tools to convey their message. So now let's talk about the types of poetry. In types of poetry, we have sonnet. Sonnet is actually a small poem. It is taken, this word sonnet is taken from Italian word sonetto, which means small or a shorter. So if the most famous sonnets, they are written by Shakespeare. They are mostly a poem, you can simply say in simple words, a poem that has 14 lines. A poem about 14 to 15 lines is called a sonnet, because a poem of 14 and 15 lines is always a short poem as compared to the others. So the most famous sonnets, they were written by Shakespeare. He wrote about 150 sonnets, and 138th sonnet is one of the famous. All of his sonnets are very famous, but 138th and I think 120th, these are two love sonnets. They mostly, these sonnets, they describe the love themes, so they are very famous. So sonnet is a poem that usually contains 14 or it can be of 15 lines. It has love themes and it means a small poem. Most famous sonnets, they are written by Shakespeare. Then we have haiku. Haiku is a kind of poetry which is about 3 lines. Line 1 contains 5 syllables, line 2 contains 7 syllables, and line 3 contains 5 syllables. So 5, 7, 5. So 3 lines poem is called haiku. Then we have elegy. In elegy, it's a type of poem that is a serious. I mean, elegy means when a poem is written to describe, to mourn the death of someone. Like the poet is sad at the death of someone who is very close to him or a public figure, and he describes his sorrow, and he describes his grief through poetry using figurative language, sound patterns, words to describe the feelings on the death of someone. This is called elegy. As one of the elegy, Lycidas, it was written by John Milton uh, for to lament or to mourn about the death of his friend, death of anyone, not about the friend but about anyone. Then we have, in types of poetry, we have ballad. Ballad is a simple poem that describes a story. One way to describe a story, that we write a short story, then we write a novel, then we have dramas where stories are given. But one way is to tell a story through poems. In English poetry, we come across many poems where the stories are given. If you remember the poem, if I'm not wrong, yes, The Tale of Two Cities. The topic was Tale of Two Cities. Somewhere in college education or school education, it is included in the syllabus. Tale of Two Cities was two, were actually two cities of Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where atomic bombs were exploded, bombarded by the United States of America, and both the cities, they were destroyed. So an event was described there, that what happened to those cities and how the people they are living there. So kind of story, when a story is described in a poem, it is called a ballad. The example is Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is also was a famous poet of English. So he wrote this. So for example, you can use this one, Annabel Lee. Then we have odes. Odes addresses a specific person, thing, or event. Mostly we talk about an event in poetry, we talk about some philosophy, but when we talk about a specific event or specific person, like if a poetry is written about Qaid Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, if an Urdu poet, if they to describe the greatness of Qaid Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, they wrote it, it will be an ode, because it is describing a specific person. If it is written about a person, it is written about a teacher, it is written about a student, one specific event or a thing or a person is specified, that is called ode. And ode, the example is Ode to the West Wind, a famous poem written by P.B. Shelley, a revolutionary poet of English language. Now let's talk about drama. Drama, as from the name it is apparent, to drama means to it is in the form of dialogues and it is performed on theater. But nowadays the same drama, it is broadcasted on television, sometimes on cinemas also. So this is actually the definition of drama, that any event or any story that is described through dialogues and it is performed by the actors either on stage or on television. Nowadays we have television, but just go back just 50 or 100 years ago, there were no television. So at that time the dramas, they were performed all on theaters. Nowadays we have theatrical dramas, but before that there was only one tool to perform, and that was theater. Nowadays there are movies, there are television, cinemas, television, others. So drama is in the form of dialogues and it is performed. Basically there are two major types of dramas. One is comedy and one is tragedy. From the name comedy, it appears that when there is nothing very serious and when there is nothing hurting in the drama. But in comedy, we describe in literature, as it does not mean that to describe only the funny events as we have today, we call it that is a very funny drama. Funny drama means what? A drama where a fun is created, the audience is laughing, and there is nothing serious is told. But in literature, drama is not defined as we have a perception in our mind. Drama is defined as, it can be a serious event, it can be a funny event, but described in a comic way, in the form of comedy, in a very lighter note, where just you need to keep in your mind that when we talk about comedy in dramas, there can be a serious event, but there will be no bloodshed in the comedy dramas. The event will be serious, event will be described in a funny way. It does not mean that the funny events are described in funny ways, but even the serious events, they are described in funny ways. Sometimes we have sarcastical dramas, satirical or sarcastical remarks or satirical dramas. So what satirical dramas are actually to point out the social evils that are described in the form of dramas in a very lighter note, in very funny way, or in the form of comedy. So keep in your mind one thing, that funny comedy doesn't mean that only the funny events. Comedy means that any serious event that is described in a comic way or in the form of comedy, but the theme of the drama will remain the same. And tragedy, it is clear that incident described in serious form of manner, like serious events, they are described seriously. There will be, at the end, people will die in tragedy. In the middle, people will die. The characters, they will be suffering. The characters, they will be attacked by the enemies. They will having misfortune. They will having stroke of bad luck. So there is nothing be funny. Serious events that are described in extreme serious manners, that is tragedy. And serious events described in funny way, this is called comedy. Funny events and serious both. But in tragedy, only the serious stories and serious incident described in a very serious way. In comedy, we have famous drama written by Shakespeare, Twelfth Night. And in tragedy, you can give example of King Lear. Many of the tragedies, they are written by Shakespeare, but King Lear is one of the famous one. Hamlet also. Hamlet is more famous than King Lear. Then we have tragicomedy. Tragicomedy was something that was introduced by Shakespeare. Before that, it was not that much used as Shakespeare used these tragicomedies. Tragicomedy means a play starts with comedy in a very funny way, but with the passage of time, the serious incidents involves and it moves towards tragedy. But again, in tragicomedies, at the end, there is not that much disaster as there is in tragedies. Like Romeo and Juliet is also written by Shakespeare. It is also a genre of tragicomedy, and most famous one is Merchant of Venice, where the in the beginning the events are quite on a lighter note, but at the end it becomes a very serious one. But again, at the end of the drama, when the drama was over, it ended, no one was hurt physically. So this is called actually tragicomedy. Both the elements of tragedy and comedy, when they are combined together, they are actually the form of we call it tragicomedy. The example you can see, it's Merchant of Venus. Then we have melodrama. Melodrama is a dramatic work. Typically, in melodrama, we talk about emotions like long dialogues. There is, because there are two things in drama. Writer either focus on action or on emotions. When they focus on actions, it is tragedy. When they focus only on emotions, long dialogues and emotional dialogues, sentiments are involved, that is called melodrama. Like, you just exaggerate the events to make the events longer, and without focusing on the action of the drama, that how it is moving towards its climax, the focus is only on the dialogues and only on the sentiments and emotions. A drama written by Shakespeare named Macbeth. Macbeth is, you can say, a kind of melodrama. So these are the types of poetry and types of drama in literature.